There is a very specific, uh, very quiet kind of heartbreak that happens in fertility clinics. We've all heard the stories, or maybe you listening are living it right now. You walk into these clinics and it feels like you've stepped into the future.
It's true. It's like a spaceship, honestly.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
you have the absolute best doctors. The science is just incredible. The timing is down to the millisecond. And they show you this image of an embryo that looks technically perfect under the microscope, but then the transfer happens
Right.
and it just doesn't stick.
It's the silence after that bad news phone call that really gets to people, and it leads to this incredibly frustrating question. If the medicine was perfect and the embryo was perfect, what actually went wrong?
It feels like there's a missing variable in the equation. Like you have all the right numbers, but the sum's coming out wrong. And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We are looking at a concept called integrative fertility.
Right. This is the intersection where high-tech aggressive Western medicine meets physiologic optimization. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about where they meet.
And to guide us through this, we are doing a deep dive into a patient guide focused on the work of Mike Berkeley. He's a licensed acupuncturist and a fellow of the American Board of Oriental Reproductive Medicine. But what makes this source material really interesting is that it specifically contrasts his work with standard reproductive endocrinology.
And I think it's important to set the stage here early on. The mission of this deep dive isn't to say East is better than West or vice versa. The source is very, very clear on that. We're just reporting on what's in the text. It's about understanding the two-lane approach.
Two lanes.
Exactly. How medical treatment, so what your reproductive endocrinologist or REI does, and integrative care perform completely different yet totally complementary functions.
So let's get into that two-lane metaphor. So I
Yeah.
think for anyone listening who feels lost in the process, this visual really grounds things. The source describes the REI, the doctor, as the architect of the road.
Think of the REI as the civil engineer. They are doing the heavy lifting. According to the source, their role is very specific and highly technical. They diagnose the structural infertility. They prescribe the stimulation protocols to force the ovaries to produce eggs. They perform the surgeries like the retrievals and the transfers.
They're managing the mechanics, getting the egg and sperm together in a dish, checking the genetics and putting it back.
Yeah.
It's precision engineering.
Precisely. But here's the catch, and this is the core argument of the source material the engineer can build a perfect road, flawless asphalt, perfect lane markers. But they cannot control the weather.
Or the stability of the ground underneath the road.
Exactly. And that is the second lane. That is where Mike Berkeley's role comes in. The source defines his lane not as replacing the medical procedure, but improving the body's readiness for it.
Physiologic readiness. I actually circled that phrase in my notes. Because it implies that you can force the biology with drugs, but if the underlying system isn't ready.
The road washes away, or the car just can't get traction.
So while the REI is focusing on the embryo, the seed, the integrative side is looking at the host, the soil. Now, what specific tools are we talking about here? Because usually when people hear integrative fertility, they just think, oh, acupuncture for stress.
And sure, stress regulation is part of it, but the source material gets surprisingly technical. It lists acupuncture as the primary modality, yes, but also customized herbal medicine and low-level light therapy. And the targets are biological, not just wellness vibes. We are talking about ovarian function, the follicular environment where the egg matures, the endometrial lining, and crucially blood flow.
Okay, hold on. Blood flow. That sounds like one of those generic health terms you hear everywhere. Drink water, improve blood flow. But the source treats this as a hard medical metric. Why is this the headline?
Because in fertility, blood flow isn't just about circulation, it's about perfusion. And there is a big difference there.
Explain that distinction for us.
Circulation is just blood moving around the body. Your heart is beating, blood is moving. Great. Perfusion is the blood actually penetrating the tissue, specifically the tiny microvessels in the uterus and ovaries, and delivering oxygen and nutrients exactly where they are needed.
So you could have good blood pressure and a healthy heart rate, but still have poor perfusion to the uterus.
Exactly. The uterus needs to literally be drinking in the blood supply. The source introduces a technical concept here called impedance.
Which in physics means resistance.
Right. Think of a garden hose. If the hose is wide open, the water flows freely, that's low impedance. But if there's a kink in the hose, the pressure builds up behind the kink, but nothing comes out the end, that is high impedance.
And in this analogy, the water is the blood carrying the hormones and the oxygen the egg and lining need.
Correct. In medical terms, we measure this with something called the pulsatility index, or PI. There's also the resistive index, or RI.
And we want those numbers low.
We want them low. A high PI means the uterine arteries are constricted, the hose is kinked, the uterus is essentially starving, even if the rest of you is healthy. A low PI means the vessels are dilated, lush, and receptive.
Is this just theory, or is there actual data in the source backing this up? Because it sounds logical, but biology is rarely that simple.
There is data. The source cites a classic study by Stenner-Victorin. It's a benchmark study in this field. It showed that specific electroacupuncture protocols significantly reduced high uterine artery blood flow impedance.
Electroacupuncture, that sounds intense.
It sounds like it, but it's actually very gentle. It uses a mild current to stimulate the nervous system more consistently than manual needles. And the result regarding the study wasn't just that people felt better. The ultrasound data showed the blood flow resistance actually dropped. It literally unkinked the hose.
And presumably that changes the structure of the lining itself.
Yes. The source references a systematic review showing that this improved perfusion leads to a trilinear endometrium.
Trilinear, I've seen that on IVF forms. That's the gold standard, right?
It is. When you look at the uterine lining on an ultrasound, you don't just want it thick. You want to see 3 distinct layers. That triple line pattern indicates that the tissue is structurally organized and ready for an embryo to latch on. If it's just a white blob on the screen, implantation rates plummet.
So connecting the dots here, the REI gives the estrogen to thicken the lining. But the integrative side, the acupuncture, ensures the blood flow is actually getting to that lining to create the structure.
Exactly. Synergy. The REI provides the bricks, the acupuncture provides the mortar.
Okay, I want to pivot to the timeline now, because the thing that really stood out to me in this source text wasn't just what they do, but when they do it. There is a very specific protocol mentioned around the day of the embryo transfer. They call it the sandwich.
The sandwich. It's probably the most well-known protocol in IVF acupuncture. It refers to receiving treatment immediately before the transfer and immediately after.
Let's break that down. Why before? Is that just to calm the patient down so they don't freak out in the stirrups?
That's a side benefit, but no. The pre-transfer strategy is mechanical. It goes back to that impedance we just talked about. The goal is to lower uterine artery impedance right before the procedure to create a highly receptive environment. You are essentially rolling out the red carpet.
Okay, open the gates. That makes sense. But the post-transfer strategy, this was the part that I actually hadn't heard before, and honestly, it blew my mind a little. The source points to a specific biological problem caused by the medical procedure itself.
This is a nuance that often gets overlooked. Think about the transfer physically. The REI has to insert a catheter through the cervix and into the uterus to drop off the embryo. Now, REIs are incredibly skilled and gentle, but biologically, that catheter is a foreign object.
And the body is programmed to reject foreign objects.
Or at least react to them. The uterus is a muscle. When you poke a muscle, it reacts. It can spasm. This is called uterine peristalsis.
Like a cramp.
Like a microcramp. You might not even feel it. But think of the uterus like a sea. If the water is choppy, if there are waves, it's very hard for a boat to anchor.
And the source draws a scary line here between these cramps and ectopic pregnancies.
It does, and the statistics are startling. In a natural pregnancy, the ectopic rate where the embryo implants in the fallopian tube instead of the uterus is about 2%. But with IVF, the source notes it can range from 2.1% all the way up to 8.6%.
That is a huge jump. Almost 4 times the risk in some cases.
Right. And the leading theory mentioned in the text is that those uterine contractions triggered by the catheter can actually push the floating embryo up into the fallopian tubes before it has a chance to settle.
Wow. So the post-transfer acupuncture isn't just Zen time. It's basically a sedative for the uterus.
That's the perfect way to describe it. The acupuncture points used post-transfer are specifically chosen to stop those contractions. The goal is to induce relaxation in the smooth muscle of the uterus and keep the embryo in the fundus, the top of the uterus, where it belongs.
The source mentions a study by Fenchen.
Yes, the Fenchen study is fascinating. They actually measured uterine contractions per minute at the time of transfer, and they found a stepwise drop in pregnancy rates as contraction frequency increased.
So high contractions equals low success.
Direct correlation. So if the integrative approach can stop the spasming, you are protecting the work the REI just did.
That is a massive aha moment. It explains why the timing matters so much. You can't do that 3 days later. It has to be right then.
Exactly. You have to calm the waters immediately.
But let's play the tape forward. You do the sandwich, the transfer works, you get the positive beta test. Hooray! Sparkling cider for everyone. But for anyone who has been on this journey, the anxiety doesn't stop there.
No, it doesn't. The first trimester is a minefield.
The source talks about the danger zone usually before week 12, and it points to a specific culprit for early loss: hypoxia.
Hypoxia means a lack of oxygen. This is really important because we often assume miscarriage is always genetic, that it was a bad egg or chromosomal abnormality, and often it is. But the source argues that a significant number of early losses happen because the support system fails.
The soil again.
Right. The source explains that initially the embryo feeds off the yolk sac and then the placenta takes over. If the blood flow to the developing placenta is restricted, the embryo starves of oxygen.
It suffocates.
Essentially. So the Berkeley protocol described doesn't stop at the positive test. It continues twice weekly for 13 weeks.
It seems like a lot of appointments.
It is a commitment, but the logic is maintenance. You've planted the seed, now you need to ensure the soil stays moist and nutrient-rich while the roots take hold. They are trying to prevent hypoxic miscarriage by keeping that garden hose wide open.
I want to pivot now to the other side of the room, because usually when we talk fertility, the focus is 90% on the person carrying the pregnancy. The woman is the one getting the shots, the scans, the surgery. But the source material has a whole section dedicated to the male factor.
And this is an area that is vastly underserved in standard care. The source is quite critical of how we currently evaluate men.
Right. Standard sperm analysis looks at count motility, how fast they swim, and morphology, which is shape. If those are okay, the guy gets a pat on the back and is told you're good.
Right. But the text argues that's like looking at the outside of a car to see if the engine runs. It might look shiny, the tires might be good, but if the engine block is cracked, it's not going anywhere.
And the engine block here is DNA.
Exactly. The source brings up sperm DNA fragmentation, or SDF.
What is that exactly? Is it a genetic disease?
No, it's not a mutation like cystic fibrosis. Imagine the DNA inside the sperm head is a blueprint for the baby tightly packed into an envelope. Fragmentation means the blueprint is torn or shredded. The sperm might look fine under a microscope, it might swim fast, but if it fertilizes the egg, the instructions are incomplete.
And that leads to what?
Recurrent miscarriage and IVF failure. The embryo forms, but it hits a developmental wall around day 3 or day 5 because the blueprint is missing pages.
That is incredibly heavy, because if you're just looking at the standard test, you'd never know. Who needs to worry about this? Is it everyone?
The source highlights men over 39 specifically. We talk about biological clocks for women, but men have them too. Or couples with unexplained poor outcomes. If you're seeing repeated failure and the female workup looks okay, you have to look at the DNA integrity of the sperm.
And can you fix a torn blueprint? My gut says DNA damage is permanent.
Surprisingly, the source says yes, you can improve it, because a lot of this damage is caused by oxidative stress, basically inflammation, and free radicals attacking the sperm while they are being made.
So if you lower the stress,
the body can produce better sperm. New sperm are made every 72 to 90 days. So the integrative fix involves acupuncture-specific antioxidant herbs and lifestyle changes to reduce that oxidative stress. The goal is to clean up the testicular environment so the next batch of sperm comes out with the blueprints intact.
it really reinforces that idea of the environment again. It's not just the uterine environment, it's the testicular environment too.
Biology is biology. It all needs good flow and low inflammation.
Now, speaking of difficult topics, we have to address the elephant in the room. Egg quality. It's the thing every patient dreads hearing. Your egg quality is poor. It feels like a life sentence.
It feels final. It feels like I am broken.
But the source material challenges how we think about this. It suggests we might be defining quality wrong.
It does, and I found this part really empowering. The text argues that egg quality is usually inferred from outcomes. If the embryo doesn't survive, we assume the egg was bad. It's a retrospective blame game.
The cake didn't rise, so the flour must have been bad.
Exactly. But what if the oven wasn't hot enough? The argument here is if a patient fails IVF repeatedly, then adds integrative care, improving the blood flow to the ovaries, reducing inflammation, and then succeeds, what happened? Did their genetics change?
No. You can't change your genetics.
Right. So the egg didn't magically get younger, but the environment changed. The egg matures inside a follicle for about 90 days before ovulation. It is bathing in follicular fluid. If that fluid is rich in oxygen and nutrients and low in inflammatory markers, the egg develops better energy reserves.
Like mitochondria.
Exactly. The mitochondria are the battery pack of the cell. An egg needs a massive amount of energy to divide and become an embryo. Integrative care aims to charge that battery. So quality isn't just a fixed genetic number, it's also a product of the biological environment the egg spent the last 3 months in.
That is a huge distinction.
Yeah.
It moves egg quality from something you're a victim of to something you might be able to influence.
And there is data to back this up. The source mentions a very recent 2024 meta-analysis,
I saw that. It cited improved CPR and LBR.
clinical pregnancy rates, and live birth rates. It suggests that when acupuncture is added to IVF, those rates go up. It's not magic, and it doesn't fix everything, but it suggests that optimizing that physiology does translate to better real-world outcomes.
We're coming up on time, but I want to briefly touch on the homework mentioned in the source, because you can't just go to acupuncture for an hour and then eat fast food and not sleep right.
I wish, but no. The source touches on lifestyle factors. Anti-inflammatory diets prioritizing sleep and specific supplements. It's all part of the same mission. You are trying to lower the overall inflammatory load on the body.
To make the body feel safe.
Exactly. Evolutionarily speaking, a stressed, inflamed body is not a body that wants to reproduce. It thinks there's a famine or a tiger. Integrative fertility is about whispering to the nervous system, it's okay, it's safe, you can prioritize this now.
So let's wrap this up and look at the big picture. We started with the 2-lane highway.
Right. On one lane, you have the REI. They are the architects providing the incredible medical technology, the precise hormones, the microsurgery. They build the road. They are essential.
And in the other lane, you have the integrative care, Mike Berkeley's approach.
Which is ensuring the weather is clear and the ground is stable. They are optimizing the perfusion, calming the nervous system, and ensuring the uterus is physiologically ready to accept the work the REI is doing.
It's the synergy. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about recognizing that biology requires both structure and nurturing.
Yes, you need the seed, but you also need the soil.
Now, before we sign off, we have to remind you that we are just two voices breaking down a source text. We are not doctors, we're not acupuncturists, and we are definitely not giving medical advice. We're just impartially reporting on the materials provided regarding the work of Mike Berkeley and the broader field of integrative fertility.
Always consult with your medical team for your specific situation. Everybody is different.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought from this deep dive. We often think of fertility as a numbers game. Follicle counts, hormone levels, success rates. It can feel very cold. But what if our intense focus on the microscopic embryo has made us somewhat blind to the macroscopic environment of the human carrying it? What else is your body trying to tell you about its readiness that standard tests just aren't measuring?
It really makes you think. It reminds us that we aren't machines, we're gardens. And sometimes you have to tend the soil before you can expect the flower.
We aren't machines, we're gardens. I think that's a beautiful place to leave it. Something for you to mull over as you navigate your own journey. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It was a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.